Today, we're diving into Nepal's critical 2026 general election. And let me tell you, this isn't just any election. It's shaping up to be a major test for the country's democracy, and it's happening right after a period of just, well, unprecedented upheaval.
Yeah, this election isn't some routine political cycle. It was basically born from fire, directly triggered by the massive 2025 Gen Z protests that actually led to the Prime Minister's resignation and the dissolution of Parliament.
So what drove hundreds of thousands of young people into the streets? Well, it was a perfect storm, really. You had rampant corruption, soaring youth unemployment, and this deep-seated anger over the nepotism of the political elite, which just exploded online with hashtags like #NepoKid. All this frustration over a stagnant economy and a massive brain drain is what set the stage for this political showdown.
Now, to really understand the core conflict of this election, we first need to get a handle on the unique way Nepal's parliament is structured. It all comes down to something called a two-ballot system.
Okay, let's break this down. When a Nepali citizen goes to vote, they actually cast two separate ballots to fill the 275 seats in their House of Representatives. The seats are split between two very different systems. So you've got 165 seats, that's 60% of the total, decided by what's called first past the post. The other 110 seats, the remaining 40%, are for proportional representation.
And this is where it gets really interesting, because this slide shows the system's dual promise. That first-past-the-post ballot for those 165 seats, that's all about giving you a direct, geographic voice. You vote for a specific person to represent your local area, your neighborhood. But that second ballot for the 110 proportional representation seats, that's aiming for something completely different: democratic representation. You vote for a party, and the seats are then handed out to make sure marginalized communities get a real voice in parliament. So it's this balance between local accountability and national inclusion.
Sounds like a brilliant idea on paper, right? But the big question we have to ask is this constitutional blueprint actually working the way it's supposed to? Let's take a hard look at the political reality.
So, is the system delivering on that promise? Well, the evidence suggests there's a huge and, honestly, a growing gap between the promise of inclusion and what's actually happening on the ground.
First, let's talk about those direct first-past-the-post elections. The big problem here is that marginalized groups and women are consistently, and I mean consistently, sidelined from the most competitive, winnable districts. These key seats just stay firmly in the hands of elite, male, and politically dug-in candidates. So you'd think the proportional representation system would fix this, right? Well, here's the crucial point. The PR system, which was designed specifically as a corrective measure, is being exploited. Parties are using it to reward insiders. For example, the Nepali Congress put senior leaders and relatives of top figures on its PR lists. And even the newer Rashtriya Swatantra Party, the RSP, put celebrities and business figures on theirs. It's basically become a tool for political favors, not for empowering excluded communities.
Now, this is really important. Nepal's constitution actually mandates that at least one-third, that's 33% of the members of parliament must be women.
And this just perfectly illustrates the problem. That one-third quota for women, it's being met almost entirely through the proportional representation list. What that means is parties aren't nominating women in those direct, winnable elections. Instead, they just use the PR list as a constitutional fallback to hit the target. So instead of being a sign of success, meeting the gender quota this way has become this powerful symbol of the entire system's failure.
So you can see how all of this starts to build into a much wider crisis of trust in the country's political institutions. It's not just about who the candidates are anymore, it's about the entire process itself.
And this growing discontent is clashing directly with the core demands that came out of those Gen Z protests. A key point in the agreement they signed with the government was a call for, and I'm quoting here, the institutionalization of inclusion and the rejection of tokenistic representation. In other words, people are tired of just checking boxes. They want real structural change.
Now, to be fair, this election isn't a total free-for-all. It's governed by a pretty strict code of conduct, which includes official spending caps for all candidates and bans on using government resources for campaigning. But, while those rules are in place, deeper institutional issues are really starting to raise alarms.
And here is one of the biggest red flags. A major concern has popped up around voter privacy, with the advocacy group Digital Rights Nepal formally objecting to how the Election Commission is handling very sensitive voter data.
They're arguing that the Election Commission's decision to share digital copies of voter lists with political parties, lists that include voter numbers, age, gender, even parents' names, violates constitutional privacy protections. This creates huge risks of voter profiling and could potentially harm minorities, which, as you can imagine, just erodes public trust in the whole process even more.
All of this brings Nepal to a really defining moment for its democracy. It's pitting the very intent of its constitution against the actual actions of its political class.
And just look at how fast all of this happened. In September 2025, the Gen Z protests erupt. By October, Parliament is dissolved. In December, the parties submit those controversial PR lists we talked about. By January, the Code of Conduct is in effect, all leading to this high-stakes general election in March 2026. From the streets to the ballot box in just 6 months. Incredible.
At its heart, the foundational promise of Nepal's constitution is so clear and unambiguous. It's to create a government that truly represents all of its citizens in all of their rich diversity.
But as nearly 19 million voters head to the polls, the central question remains, can the nation's democratic ideals, its constitutional promise, actually survive the political practices of its parties? The answer to that is going to shape the future of Nepal.